Rango! Rango! I just love the way the film opens. I actually saw this film quite a while ago, and I haven't seen it since, but I had quite a bit of free time when I actually saw this film, and I enjoyed it so much that I decided I'd watch it a couple of times more. So I remember it quite well. I remember sort of fairly distinctly everything that happens in it, so I think I'm still in a fairly good position to review this film now. So anyway, as you've probably guessed already, this was a good film. This wasn't an absolute brilliant masterpiece or anything, but it was like really good. Let's get into the film itself. First of all, I found this kind of interesting. I believe I don't know this for absolute certain, so don't quote me on this, but I believe this is the first computer-generated animated film produced by Paramount, and that's interesting. They're sort of getting into this fray that a lot of studios seem to be getting into. I mean, Pixar is the undisputed king. Then you've got DreamWorks with kind of okay films and some quite good. Not too many that are absolutely brilliant, as far as I'm concerned. And then you've got Fox, who are just really like scraping the barrel. I haven't seen one film they've not. What I haven't seen one computer-generated animated film they've produced so far that I've actually liked in any kind of way. As far as this, what I think is a first effort by Paramount, this is really good. Basically, the story is about this chameleon, who is the title character, Rango, voiced absolutely brilliantly by Johnny Depp, by the way. And he's basically spent his whole life concealed in a tank owned by some people on a road trip when the film begins. And he doesn't really know anything about the outside world. He's just spent his whole life almost literally in a goldfish bowl, looking out of his glass walls at the outside world, not really knowing anything about it. And he basically does sort of want more out of his life. He sort of like pretends that his life has more significance and is more active by interacting with these inanimate objects in his tank and pretending that he's a great knight or a warrior or something. And then he actually does get thrown into the outside world and does have to live this kind of life when there's a crash and his tank falls out the back of the car. And so he basically comes across this sort of late 19th century sort of American town style thing. And it basically has the feel of a western for the rest of the film. But there's just this sort of interesting element at the start of the film that we kind of know that Rango has. This is literally like his first experience of the outside world. He doesn't know anything more than what he's experienced in his tank, which isn't very much. And now he's trying to sort of interact and get involved in a real sort of conflict and adventure, which is sort of like a western. And then it becomes revealed like sort of 2/3 of the way through the film that actually he isn't anything of what he said. But at the same time, this actually kind of confused me when I first saw it. I was like, but this is who he is. He wasn't anyone before he got out. He got out of his tank and actually got into the outside world. So this essentially is what Rango is. Just because he's maybe made up a few sort of specific stories about the life he's led so far. He's not interested in admitting that he has had no life before this experience. He's like a baby in a way, almost. This is his first experience of life, and just the fact that he has had no experience prior to this somehow means that this isn't who he is. That he has to he's been confined to this world of a tank and interacting with inanimate objects, and he has to sort of be that for the rest of his life just because that's who he's been up to that point. He can't adopt any kind of new lifestyle or anything. That kind of confused me when I first saw it, but I think I realised later on that maybe Rango himself didn't realise that this is who he is, and he needed like the villain, I forget his name, Jake the Snake or something, is it? He needed him to sort of tell him, you've been living a lie, you don't live this kind of life, you're not from the West, this isn't who you are. And Rango sort of realised, well, actually, this is who I am. It's just that I needed you to tell me that in order for me to realise it. I haven't been anyone up until this point. Now suddenly I have been given a life, and this is actually who I am. So yeah, that was an interesting kind of conflict for me. Aside from that, the story is a pretty interesting kind of Western idea, which is with animals, basically. As far as that idea goes, it's fairly reasonable. The one issue I would have, I think, maybe with that element of it is it's maybe a little bit sort of. I don't know if they were maybe going for a kind of a slight parody element, but I kind of got the idea that it was a little bit too formulated, a bit too standard in some areas, particularly when you hit what's the narrator, these sort of group of birds. in sombreros who act as the narrators, you kind of get the idea that they are sort of trying to sort of parodise the idea of the hero's journey. Other than that, I really can't think of anything about the film that I didn't like. The comedy's there, the animation is outstanding. It's actually maybe a little bit better than some of Pixar's films, actually. And Johnny Depp, Ned Beatty as well, both do outstanding voice acting jobs. Perhaps, maybe aside from Rango, not many of the characters are fleshed out enough. I mean, there are a lot of characters in this film. Some might say maybe too many for a kids' film, but I don't like to just assume it's a kids' film just because it's animated. I think perhaps there were a couple of minor things I didn't like. The Crow character, I kind of feel is too similar to the Indian bloke from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I don't know if maybe they were trying to be a homage to that character. Maybe like that, to be honest. I think I would have liked to see something more original from that kind of character. The love factor actually wasn't formulated at all. I thought that was really well done between Rango and this other character named Beans. She has this defense mechanism where she freezes occasionally, and there's one point in the film where she pretends to freeze, and Rango kisses her when he thinks she's out of it. She's not aware of what's going on, and it turns out she was sort of testing him. I kind of like that. That was kind of interesting. I don't know if maybe they were going for a little bit of a parody element, but I kind of felt like they were almost trying to parodise the cliched elements of the hero story in many ways, from what some of the narrators were saying. And they kept mentioning about how the fact that Rango was going to die at some point in the film, which never happens. I didn't understand that either. Also, the snake character, need to find out his name. Rattlesnake Jake. I almost got it. There's this sort of weakness that he has, that he's scared of birds, I think. Or one particular bird that Rango ends up killing. They never really explain why he's scared of it. I mean, he's like sort of about 3 times the size of this bird. Why would he be scared of it? I didn't quite understand that. I also kind of like the way that water in this town is basically like its currency. It's about hoarding the water and making sure there was enough for everyone. But that's kind of interesting because when it's money, you kind of get the feeling that there is no good people in this world. They're all just greedy. Whereas with water, you actually need water to live. You need it to survive. It's not something that you can live without. Money is something you could argue perhaps you could live without, but water is something you definitely can't live without. It's kind of an interesting play on that kind of idea of greed and hoarding everything for yourself, as the bad guy in this film does. I just wonder if potentially there's so many good ideas in this film. They potentially could have maybe taken a few of them and made them into a lot of separate films. There's maybe a bit too much going on in this film for a film that's less than 2 hours. There's maybe a bit too much going on in this film for it to be able to deal with in one film. They perhaps might have been better off taking some of the ideas that they had for this film and making them into like 2 or 3. Like you've got Rango's story, you've got the story of the search for water, you've got the sort of conflict idea, you've got Rattlesnake Jake and his sort of fear of this bird, and the conflict he has with the mayor of the town. They end up being sort of co-villains in a way. So there's perhaps a bit too much going on in this film, maybe for one film. They perhaps might have been better off showing it out into 2 or 3. But as a film on its own, it's great. It is probably up there with some of like the sort of middle ground Pixar films. It's probably not up there with the absolute outstanding Pixar films like Toy Story and WALL-E. It's probably on the same level as The Incredibles, Up, and it's probably better than A Bug's Life and Monsters, Inc. And it's probably better than most of the films that DreamWorks have made. If you like the DreamWorks films, and if you like most of the Pixar films, you'll definitely like this. This is a great film. Go see it. Okay, see ya.